Occasionally, we've had to introduce a story by suggesting that if you have children watching, you may want to send them out of the room. Well, for this story, we suggest you call them in. If you're like most people, you probably never consider that the shoes you buy or the soccer ball your kids play with may have been made by children in the third world in conditions approaching slavery. In fact, this practice, which is illegal in most countries but often not enforced, is one which human rights organizations have been trying for years to make all of us pay attention to without much success. That is, until now. As we reported last April, one Canadian has managed to put the tragedy of child labor on the front page and keep it there. His name is Craig Kielburger, and he's been credited with single-handedly waking a nation to the suffering of 200 million children. He has people across Canada asking how they can help, businesses checking who's making their products, and the government in Canada moving to get tough on its trading partners. And if you're like us, you'll be surprised when you get a good look at him.
We're talking about labor and the exploitation of children. When a child's forced to work 12 to 16 hours a day in conditions...
Craig Kielburger is only 13 years old, but he's old enough to know the difference between right and wrong.
Well, basically, we're told slavery abolished. You know, not 20th century. You don't find slavery in the world today. But it was really shocking was when I was just reading through the different research that I got, when you find the worst type of slavery still exists today, slavery of children.
It all started last April when Craig, then 12, read this newspaper story about a boy his age in Pakistan. His name was Iqbal Masih, and when he was only 4 years old, his parents, like so many others, offered their son's labor in exchange for a small loan. Iqbal spent the next 6 years chained to a rug loom like this one, working 12-hour days for pennies, until he finally escaped and joined a crusade against child labor. But after winning worldwide recognition, Iqbal's life was cut short when at the age of 12, he was shot dead in the streets of his village. No one has been convicted of the murder, and Craig Kielburger vowed to keep his cause alive. But what made you think you could do something about it?
Originally, I didn't think I could, really. But the only way you're going to ever find out is try. So after doing some research, I just walked to my classmates and said, listen, I read this article, here's a problem, this is what I know, which at that point was not very much, and I asked, who wants to help?
The answer, kids.
Okay, all those in favor of this agenda that we're doing today?
Craig started a group called Free the Children. The board of directors meets Saturdays in Craig's den turned command center. They're in daily contact by phone or fax with a host of international human rights groups. Craig has always done his homework to keep up on the issue, but he soon felt that homework wasn't enough. He had to meet the children he was trying to help. Why did you decide to take the trip to Asia?
I just wanted to learn more on the issue of child labor. I wanted to make sure that we're not imposing our Western culture on these people. I wanted to speak to the children. I wanted to hear their views. Ask them, what do you want? How can your life be better?
Did your parents want you to go to Asia?
No way. You should imagine the look on their face the first time I told them.
We wouldn't even let him take the subway downtown Toronto by himself. So to let him go to Asia was unthinkable.
Teresa and Fred Kielburger are both school teachers. What worried you?
Well, I think, how many parents would let their 12-year-old child go traipsing through Asia for 7 weeks?
Yet you did change your mind.
Well, we did, but at first he works on you, you know.
He worked on them so well, they let him miss 7 weeks of school and bought his plane ticket to travel halfway around the world. Chaperoned at each stop by local human rights advocates and armed with a video camera, he went from Bangladesh to Thailand and then on to India, Nepal, and Pakistan. Was it difficult to find children? I mean, could you get into these factories and places where they worked?
The perception that I had was that in child labor, it's all in the deep, dark back alleys. No one can see it beyond public scrutiny. But the truth is, it's practiced in the open.
The shock for Craig was to discover that child labor wasn't just in hidden sweatshops, it was everywhere. In a boy making metal cups to be shipped to hotels and restaurants. A girl bagging candy 11 hours a day in an overheated room. Or a boy stitching soccer balls. Craig found himself staring into faces his age and younger. kids who were missing their childhood, who were separated from their parents, tortured for small mistakes. And in some cases, the work was life-threatening.
One shop that I went into, I met one 8-year-old girl. She was just pulling apart syringes and needles, piece by piece, putting them in buckets for their plastics. She wore no gloves, literally, and no shoes. All she was doing was squatting on the ground, surrounded by a pile of needles.
Used needles.
Yes, they were from hospitals, from the street, from the garbage. We asked her, don't you worry about AIDS and other diseases like that? We got no response. She didn't know what they were. At one point, we even saw her step on the pile of needles to get to the other side.
Craig was able to talk to the kids in a way no other Westerner had, as one child to another.
Has he ever gone to school? One young boy who I met in a brick kiln, he told me how his grandfather had taken out a small loan. Now that's 2 generations back. And he's still working along side by side with his relatives to try to pay off the debt.
From 2 generations before.
2 generations back.
Perhaps the most powerful stop for Craig was the small cemetery where he visited the unmarked grave of the child who first inspired him.
Here we are in Iqbal's grave. There's no marking to say who he is or what year he died or anything about his life. It's simply he's buried underneath here, under all these bricks.
Now I know that he is really dead. And the only thing which I think matters is to carry on his memory, carry on his work.
That work landed him in the center of a media storm when Canada's Prime Minister Jean Chrétien happened to arrive in Asia at the same time, accompanied by 300 Canadian business leaders who were eager to sign export-import deals amounting to several $billion. The 13-year-old said, wait a minute. He wanted to talk to his prime minister about the plight of children who made some of those exports before the businessmen signed any contracts. But the prime minister turned him down. So Craig met with the people who would listen. He held a news conference. With 2 former child laborers at his side, he helped them tell their stories.
He had been hit by his master with his steel iron rod.
The prime minister could not have anticipated the fallout back home.
He upstaged the Prime Minister during Team Canada's trade trip and catapulted the issue of child labor onto the national agenda.
Back in Asia, the Prime Minister changed his mind about sitting down with an 8th grader. Were you nervous at all meeting the Prime Minister?
Is anyone not? Like you have your neck out and you have a guillotine quite nearby. There's always a little bit of nervousness. You never can get over that.
He may have been nervous, but he did get his point across.
We in the Canadian government are open to looking at new ways to combat child labor through toughening our own imports restrictions.
Hi.
There's nobody Craig won't lobby, from the Premier of British Columbia to 2,000 union leaders at their biannual convention where, after hearing Craig speak, they spontaneously pledged $150,000 to his cause. He and his group Free the Children persuaded the mayor of Toronto to ban fireworks made by children. The federal government is considering a program to label rugs so customers will know they were made without child labor. The Minister of Foreign Affairs offered Craig an advisory position in the government, and last month the House of Commons recognized his work.
I invite all parliamentarians on both sides of this House to work together along with Craig and Free the Children to stop child laboring. Let us all applaud one of the heroes of Canada. Thank you.
For Craig, his national celebrity allows him to reach the audience that matters to him the most, young people.
Because I believe that young people can make a difference, and I believe that young people, when speaking it out, do have a lot of power. One of the best parts about being young is we still have our imagination. We still think we can fly. We still think we can go to the moon. There are so many things which you think are unstoppable yet.
And so, with slides of Asia in his backpack, Craig goes from school to school across Canada, sharing what he's learned, urging other kids to think beyond themselves. You go to Asia. You meet all of these kids. You get on a plane and fly back home. What did you think about leaving all of those kids there, knowing the life that they would still have to lead?
It was really difficult from the way that you look at it, as if you know, I'm flying back to Canada, I'm flying back to this. And yet, they're still there. Now that's difficult in itself, but when I return to Canada, I could speak to so many more people. Like even right now, the reason I'm going place to place, school to school, is to talk to people, to say, listen, here's a problem. I've seen it with my own eyes. This does exist. And you're in a perfect opportunity to fix it. Everyone's in a perfect opportunity to help.
You ever worry that he's doing too much for a 13-year-old?
Oh, of course, all the time. All the time. And it's very important for me that he remain a child, that he enjoys his childhood, that he be able to rollerblade, to swim, to ski, to do all those things. The challenge for us is trying to make sure that all these things are built in around all the speaking engagements, around all the traveling.
Have you ever suggested that he take a break from it?
Yes, actually last September, his mother suggested he quit. I pulled him aside and I said, you know, it's your last year in elementary school and I think you guys have accomplished so much. Maybe it's time to quit now. And I said, well, I want you to think about that. So he left for about 5 minutes and then he came back and he said, you know, I can't quit. The problem is still there. I have to keep going.
Are the two of you activists?
We're not involved in anything, actually. We're quite dull. We're quite dull.
But their life is far from dull these days. The phone rings at all hours. An uninterrupted family dinner is a rare occasion, and goodbyes are routine.
Make sure you have time for fun.
Craig admits to sometimes feeling run down, but says he can't slow down when there's so much left to do.
A lot of people say, it's a lot easier to be ignorant and say, I don't know the problem. But once you know that problem, once you've seen it in their eyes, then you have a responsibility to do something. I think that's why people say, why are you doing it? Because I have a responsibility now.
Why you?
Why not? And if everyone in the world could say, why me? Then nothing ever would be accomplished. Why me? Because I've met those children, because I've seen them. Because I read the story of Iqbal Masih. Why not me? I'm pretty lucky. What else do I have to worry about?
Somebody said, you know, maybe, you know, this has been Craig's calling at this time in his life to do something, to sort of to take up Iqbal's mission, you know? And I mean, I'm very rational, and I'm basically not, you know, that religious. But when you look at all the events and the timing of events that have occurred in his life, the people he's met, unplanned incidents, you know, you almost wonder if maybe Iqbal up there is looking down and maybe he has, you know, in a way, taken over the torch for this year or something.
Your mother said, I asked who is directing this thing. She said, I think Iqbal's up there directing this thing.
Honestly, no, but perhaps Iqbal is up there. Perhaps he's helping a lot. Actually, I'm pretty sure he is.
Next month, Craig Kielburger goes on another fact-finding mission, this time to Brazil, to meet with child laborers working in charcoal kilns, shoe factories, and sugarcane fields.